What's good, YouTube? Steel here, and as you can see, we finally made it to Master Ball rank, and I just wanted to make a video not only like recapping sort of like my experience, like in the sense of how it went, my stats. I want to show y'all my win percentage, how many games it took me to get here, what decks I used, but I would go in that order. As you can see, I did go I got my 4-game win streak to get into Master Ball rank with the Darkrai Giratina list. I was using the variant with Arceus. And I will get into exactly the list that I used, but first I wanted to point out like the stats. As we look at battle history, yes, you can see my last win got me ranked up. I did do it with 4 wins, but before that is a 3-game loss streak. Then we won, lost, won, lost. Then eventually we lost 2 in a row. Then we won 3 in a row, and then like it was like a complete back and forth. And that was like most of my experience in Ultra Ball, especially actually no, that was most of my experience in Ultra Ball 4. Once I got to Ultra Ball 4 is where I like threw away all the fun decks that I was using and just went pure meta and started using this deck. And as you can see my stats, I went into Ultra Ball 4. I went into Ultra Ball as a whole with a win percentage of almost 70%. By the time I finished and got to Master Ball, I'm literally hovering just under 55, and it was rough. It was a lot of back and forth. And once you get to Ultra Ball, you win 10 per win and you lose 7 every time you lose. And there's no bonus for like win streaks or anything. As you saw, as you can see here, it took me a total of 470 games exactly to get to Master Ball rank. And currently, when I made it, I was like in the 4,300s. And since I stopped playing in order to like get home and do this video, I dropped down like 600 spots. And if we refresh rankings here, we're able to see that the top spot is at 2,100, almost 700 points above me. That if you think about it, it's 70 wins. Like I'd have to win 70 straight games in order to catch up to this guy. So as far as like where to go from here, I'm not too sure. But the fact that I made Master Ball rank made me feel like at least confident enough to like make some form of content, at least showing y'all what decks I used to get here. And hopefully it helps at least one of y'all. So with that said, let's go straight into the decks that I was using early on in the climb. In the early stages of ranked, my most used deck had to be by far this Darkrai Weavile deck. As my only thought was, if it was going to be a grind, I needed to get as many games in as possible. And Darkrai Weavile is a deck that might not win every matchup, especially with the popularity of Grass ever like expanding as the format kept evolving, as well as it not being too consistently beating the Darkrai Giratina deck. But the fact that you could beat the Darkrai Giratina as well as outpace a Grass deck that either bricked or didn't draw optimally, my thought was this deck is fast, so even win or lose, especially early on where a loss doesn't take away points from you and win streaks is all that matters, or just winning in general, definitely outpaces the losses. I thought I wanted to play the fastest deck possible, and this is where I landed in terms of that. As Darkrai Weavile was it's like one of the most aggressive decks, being able to attack as early with Weavile, and you just go setting up Darkrai. It's a pretty straightforward strategy that works great in not only ranked but in ladder, in tournaments. It's a deck that like never fully goes away. And when you least expect is that it does its bounce back, like basically when Grass dies down in popularity. The only like iffy choice, although it's kind of gained popularity, is the Team Rocket Grunt. That was feeding more towards the idea of being an aggro matchup where there's certain matchups that if you were using Grunt and you knocked out their energy, that was even a faster win than having to build up a Weavile Darkrai setup. So that's like the thought process behind this deck. And realistically, I use this even up to Ultra Ball 4. I was constantly rotating through 3 decks in my climb to Ultra Ball 4 before I got like hit a brick wall and had to like basically completely shift my approach to ranked. But in terms of what I used in the very beginning, especially through Pokeball and Great Ball, it was a lot of Darkrai and this Giratina Mewtwo. Giratina Mewtwo is a deck that I was using a lot early on because it had just won the Ursi Day, where it topped the Darkrai list. It topped against Arceus. Like it beat a lot of decks, and its win percentage was crazy. If you want to look at the meta report for that weekend specifically, you can see that it was crushing like all the meta decks. So I was like, you know what, let me try it out. Personally, I wasn't like the biggest fan. I felt like Darkrai decks were a little too rampant, and if you didn't open optimally, they were kind of taking advantage of you. However, it is a very strong deck. It might honestly be the best deck in the format, especially if played correctly. You got to know when to be patient. You got to know when to be aggressive. Just because you have Dawn doesn't mean you should just like use it. But honestly, it's a deck that you should give it a try if you haven't already. If you're a big fan of Mewtwo, it's no longer that deck that everybody hates. Maybe it will start being due to the fact of how popular or how strong it is. As far as how much it helped me, I have to be honest, I didn't use this deck as much as I wanted to. I might start using it a little bit more now that I'm in Master Rank and trying to climb. I might add it to my rotation of decks that I'll use. But if you're just like finding yourself in Great Ball or Ultra Ball and you want to climb, this is definitely a very good deck. It's very consistent. And one of the main things that it does is that it's like an 18 trainer that's not banking on on Misty. Like your main guy is the one that's ramping up, as well as you have all the tools to survive, in the sense that that extra Mewtwo adds an extra layer of like almost like protection. A lot of things that I have issues with the 18 trainer, like the Articuno one, is that a lot of people are like on 3 tools, but you only have 2 bodies to put them on. If you miss Misty, like the ceiling's a lot lower. But regardless, with this version, like a 17 trainer technically, you have all the tools you need. With potions, capes, and Pokemon Center Lady, you have all the heals and like health gain to like dodge all the hits that your opponents are giving. Like you dodge a lot of their ranges. And then on the other side, when you're using your helmet, Giovanni and Red, you're able to hit all the ranges that your opponent is trying to deal with. And then Dawn also adds to hitting ranges, as you're able to be aggressive and you might be attacking a turn sooner than they're expecting. This deck has all the tools you need. It's literally a toolbox. So many one-of supporters that come in clutch when your opponent least expects it. They're like, clear, like surely they won't have the out. At least in personal experience, it almost felt like they always had the out. It's just they have such a toolbox. Every card is so powerful. A lot of cards are doing the same thing. It's almost similar to like the No Trainer Challenge deck that I have, where like the entire deck is all focused on one issue. Like this whole deck is so coherent in what it's trying to do that it's going to be strong in both ranked, in tournaments, in just regular PvP. So if you haven't tried it out, please do. And trust me, it'll give you results. Again, just you gotta know, and this only comes through practice, when to be patient, when to be aggressive, when you have to build up 2 guys. You'll get that through practice, and there's no better practice than like the early stages of ranked, as you don't lose anything or lose much for like a bad game or for a misplay. Meanwhile, once you get to Ultra Ball, it's a lot less forgiving. There's no like streaks for win streaks, and you're basically almost losing as much as you gain. So if anything, it's best to just practice when you're early on in your climb. And that leads me to the decks that I use the most, especially in late Great Ball to basically all throughout Ultra Ball until I got to Ultra Ball 4. The deck that I possibly have the most games with in this entire climb was Meowscarada. Meowscarada is that perfect space between like being competitively, like almost being meta, and being like completely anti-meta at all the same times. That like combination of that duality is something that like kept drawing me into using it. And ultimately I landed for the Exeggutor build. I know there's people that are like on an Arceus Carnivine build. I know I've seen people on Beedrill. You can't really go wrong with any of them, as like their upside is all the same. You're building up to a Meowscarada that could one-shot most EXs, if not like put itself in a position where it can, whether it's using red or poking damage with Exeggutor or Carnivine early. And all of the builds have like their own pros and cons. I can't really speak for the Beedrill or the Arceus version because I didn't really use them. However, this one worked wonders for me. I'm a big fan of Exeggutor, no matter how many times it fails me, because boy does it fail me a whole bunch of times. But this list worked wonders for me. As far as my choices, I wasn't playing Communication or Iono, but I would see like the upside or the plus side in using them, as sometimes I would get like consistency issues despite how good Sprigatito is at like searching the cards you need. There's a lot that's going for it, but if you feel like you have consistency issues, feel free to put Calm, feel free to put Iono. You're gonna see it in a lot of the other builds that we cover in this video, but by far this is the deck I use the most. And honestly, I tried getting all the way to Master with it. It was in Master Ball 4 where I felt like if I was going against a Darkrai deck, I was doing great, but then I would go against like all the other stuff. There was so much Gyarados and just like 18 trainers and Charizards that it was like becoming really hard to use this deck. So it's like you gotta pick and choose. I know you can't really choose your opponent, but it's one of those things where like it's good to have it in rotation, which is why the entire time I was using Meowscarada, I also had it a fallback where I would be like, I would play this for like 5 games, win or lose, and then I'll swap into Gallade EX with Hitmonlee. Honestly, after a loss or 2 against Gyarados with the Meowscarada deck, I would instantly switch into Gallade. I had such disdain for Gyarados in this run, as like every time I tried the deck myself, I would just either break or not see my Gyarados and just sit there, or I see Gyarados and see no Magikarp and just be sitting there with a Manaphy. It was tough, but enough about Gyarados. I'll get to that later. Gallade is like one of my favorite decks in this entire run to Master Rank. It's such a like, it's almost like anti-meta, but so anti-meta. It's almost like the Rampardos of like last season, where it's what people are using to counter everything that's going on. Granted, it's not that perfect of a counter, because if you don't have the right cards, or if they see too well of a hand, Giratina does technically one-shot Gallade in most instances. All they need is a red, and you have like no option. I guess technically in that case you could play Cape or something like that to dodge it, but your main play continues to be like Hitmonlee lead, start poking at the Giratinas in the back line, and then once you have Gallade set up, you Cyrus out the Giratinas and get rid of them before they do anything to you. As you can see here, I did opt to use the Communication and Iono to add consistency, because unlike the Meowscarada deck, that if you don't have like the Meowscarada, it's very likely that you have the Exeggutor that's taking over the tempo and could win a game on its own. In this case, if you don't have Gallade, you have no win condition whatsoever unless you're going against a Gyarados that puts a Magikarp in the back. One thing that Gyarados decks started doing, which if you're on Gyarados, take note of, I guess, is if you see that your opponent's on a fighting deck, you see the fighting energy like there in their queue, in their little energy zone, lead Magikarp. Just put your Magikarp up there. If it ends up that they're in Rampardos and they start with like a Sudowoodo or what's the other guy, Riolu, then technically you're in a tougher spot. But more often than not, it's gonna be Gallade, and more often than not, they'll have like a Hitmonlee play in general. So your best bet is like literally sitting on a Magikarp actively and hope to get to the port where you could evolve it into Gyarados. That's just my 2 cents. Who am I to say? I'm not a big fan of going against or using Gyarados because of luck reasons. So as far as this deck though, very strong deck. The helmet helps get certain ranges. As you lead with Hitmonlee, add the helmet, you're almost like tagging 2 things at the same time. You're hitting the backline with Hitmonlee, and if they try to poke at the Hitmonlee, it also deals damage to their active. So that in combination with the Gallade usually knocks out anything in the game, as well as the Marshadow. Having that revenge ready in the backline is never a bad thing. And most of the times it like seals out the games that Gallade can't do itself. But yeah, in terms of like the decks that I used, Meowscarada and Gallade, like a combination of 2 with the occasional Darkrai Weavile is what carried me through most of Ultra Ball. It was until I got to Ultra Ball 4 that I was like hit a solid wall of like, I would jump into Ultra Ball 4, maybe win a game or 2, and then fall all the way back to Ultra Ball 3 and just continue that back and forth. And I did that for like, I want to say not a full day, but like probably for too long before I decided like, you know what, I'm just gonna like try my hand at like the best deck. And I say the best deck in quotations because there's like many variants. There's the Jodagon variant that has fallen out of favor. There's this Arceus variant that I saw going around, so I like did my own version of it, and it was working wonders, especially on a specific matchup, which is why I opted to use the Arceus version. And then there's the most popular version, which is just Darkrai and Giratina with no other Pokemon, which consistency wise is probably the best way to go about it. But I'm kind of like a greedier player in terms of like deck building wise. I wanted to cover as many bases as possible. So not only did I want a better chance in mirror matches, I wanted a better matchup against like the entire board, like across the board. And I felt like the Arceus version was the best for that. But again, before I get to that, let's go into like a few like honorable mentions, decks that I didn't personally use but are very popular as well as successful in the ranked ladder. So that if it calls your eye, or maybe you actually have the cards for these other decks, feel free to try them out. I'm not the biggest fan, but honestly, other people definitely are, because they were crushing it. They were crushing me every now and then. Like I said, as you saw, with a 55% win rate, you're winning and losing quite a bit. And those decks are Charizard EX, which honestly, I understand the draw to it. It's one of like, it's like, I even have them like chilling. I got that from McDonald's and I kept it there. It's one of my favorite Pokemon. It was my favorite starter in it's basic answer for like favorite Pokemon, right? But it's not my favorite. No, favorite will always be the Boyonix. But it was definitely my first starter when picking like Gen 1, even in the remix with Leaf Fire Red and Leaf Green. That's like my go-to. But it's such a pain to go against. Like I felt like every time I used it, either my Moltres would never flip heads, or I would never see Charmeleon, or something like abysmal like that. Granted, the list got more and more refined to consistency as they dropped. Like there was lists with Shaman in it. I seen that dropped. I personally dropped it, as you can see in this build. The communication, it helps to find the pieces you're missing. Iono is just like reset your hand. We're trying to find this card. It's similar to the concept that we're using in the Gallade list, but since there's no Hitmonlee here, like your only threat is literally building up that Charizard. Is like we upped the communication to 2, and we focus really on finding the cards we need. And honestly, once it works out, it's a very good deck. It has very good matchups against the best deck in the form of Giratina. As for the first 3 turns, Giratina and Darkrai are not doing nothing. They're literally just building up, trying to have 2 attackers that could do something. That if you see your perfect curve of Charizard and you start swinging for 200, they're not surviving anything, and they're not taking you out either, right? So it's obviously a really good deck with a really high ceiling. It's just the floor of consistency that I couldn't get behind like using it. But again, there's a lot of grass decks that you do crush in this meta. And in terms of like Charizard versus Gyarados, you tend to win those. Granted, the addition of red in the meta does make it where Gyarados could finally one-shot a Charizard. And speaking of Gyarados, my hate for Gyarados and Gyarados' hate for me is mutual. As when I play them, I can never see the plays. And when I'm going against it, man, do they see everything. And they'll be 10 cards deep, right? Like they've only seen half their deck. And their hand is guaranteed like Manaphy, Magikarp, Gyarados, double red. And like no matter how much I build up, and that's not counting the times that a Misty sets up that Gyarados like turn 2 and I just explode. But salt aside and pettiness aside, this is a deck that's seeing a lot of play because, again, similar to Charizard, once it gets going, there's very few things your opponent can do. and there's always the chance of like any water deck, an early Misty just closes it out to the point where like your opponent's barely done anything. It happens again where you take advantage of the fact that the best deck takes so long to set up. So this is another deck that does really well. Not a deck that I personally used. The few times that I tried it early on in the climb, and like after a few, I honestly had to rebuild this deck because I got so mad at it that I deleted it from like my list of decks for no reason. It was just like I got a Magikarp, Misty 6 tails, I mean 6 heads, so it had 6 energy on the Magikarp, and I'm like, all I need to do is draw Gyarados, and for like 3 turns my opponent wasn't doing anything and I couldn't do anything, and I just lost that game, and I was like, I'm never playing this deck again. However, it doesn't take away from how good the deck is, and my experience isn't your experience, so feel free to try it out. It's seeing play all over the meta, so it's for a good reason. The deck is strong, the ceiling is there. And speaking of Misty decks, the final deck of like in the honorable mention, or dishonorable because I'm petty, is 18 Trainer Articuno, which as sets come out, 18 trainer decks just keep getting better and better. And at this point, 17 trainer decks in the sense of like Giratina Mewtwo might also start falling in that category of decks that as sets come out and more supporters and trainer cards come out, although we haven't gotten a trader card in a while, right, since like the tools, but nonetheless, as they start coming out, it's going to be just getting better and better realistically, as long as they keep being as generic as cards like Red and stuff. In terms of 18 trainers, I am a bigger fan of Articuno than the Palkia version. The Palkia version, I think, depends too much on like Misty hitting so many heads that you could Dimensional Storm multiple times, or it depends on your opponent not doing anything or like bricking, which is not something I want to play. Articuno is far more consistent in the form that once you get it swinging for 80 damage, or the early Misties, not only are you dealing enough damage to take out whatever's in front of you, you get to keep doing that turn after turn. As always, we're playing cards like Cape, Potion, to just keep our Articunos as healthy as possible. Not to mention, I ride as like one of the most broken heal cards in the game. We were playing like technically a third Misty in the form of Grunt. That falls under the same category as a Darkrai Weavile deck, where it's one of those cards that if it works, it wins you the game just as much as like a Misty does. And the rest is pretty staple. We're just playing like our favorite cards. Cyrus is one of those that maybe I could up to 2. I just personally was like trying to fit in certain cards. Like maybe you could cut the Grunt or the red card, or I don't know. There's the best part about 18 trainer, though I'm not the biggest fan of it, is that you are able to completely customize it to your preference and your priorities, whether it's a lot more healing or you want to be aggressive and play helmets. The deck truly is like I guess a deck builder's dream in the sense of like versatility. But that's enough about 18 trainer. At the end of the day, it's just a deck that you're going to hope to flip Misty and get enough heads where you just auto win the game. So let's go into the list that actually got me from like the very beginning of Ultra Ball 4 all the way to Master. This was the only deck that I used after, like once I switched to it, I did not play a different deck until I got to Masters. And as you saw in the beginning, that deck is Darkrai Giratina with Arceus. And before I get into like the Darkrai Giratina part, because I feel like everybody either should have an idea or know exactly what that deck is trying to do, the reason I opted for the Arceus version is because there was so much grass in ladder, at least in my personal experience, and Arceus just punishes that like so badly, mainly because we do play Double Dawn to maximize the amount of times that we could start attacking earlier than like they're anticipating. And there's no better feeling than going second against grass, right? They start with either Execute or the cat and just pass turn, and you go Arceus, Giratina, give an energy to Arceus, ram Giratino's ability, and just pass, and they're like unassumingly just continue to do their setup. Maybe they go into Floragato, maybe they just like add the grass energy and search, then you just go add energy to Arceus, Dawn, and you start swinging for minimum 90, and they're like, whoa, what just happened? And you beat them way before they get anything going. And that strategy works against many decks, even in the technically quote-unquote mirror. If you're able to set that up early enough, they don't even have a setup to like punish you. However, you do need to know when to pick and choose, when to Dawn, when to be aggressive, when it's just better to sit back and build up Giratina and Darkrai. And similar to the Mewtwo deck, that only comes with practice. It's very hard for me to sit here and tell you, oh, in this situation you do this, in this situation you do that, because it's very dependent on whether you're going first, whether you're going second, whether they're going, whether you're in a mirror match and they opened way better, or you're in a mirror match and you opened better, so you have a little more freedom. Like that all comes with practice and finding out what's better. I also opted for like a more aggressive approach. I'm playing Helmet over Cape. There's a lot of builds that are playing Pokemon Center Lady and Cape to make like your Pokemon sort of like the Mewtwo build, where you're trying to survive as many ranges, like trying to dodge as many ranges as possible. I opted to be a little more aggressive. Did that maybe like delay my climb to Master Ball rank? I can't tell you, because I never tried the opposite in my grind towards the end. I tunnel visioned and like, this is the deck that's gonna do it. It was winning me like 3 games in a row, and then I would lose 1, 2 games in a row, and then I would lose 1, and it was doing so well. And then towards the end, it got a little shaky of how many wins and losses I was getting. But we got there, and honestly, I'm a big fan of the deck. You can't go wrong with any of the variants. Similar to like Meowscarada, the deck is so strong at what it does that the changes are kind of negligible. Not to the point where like if you're taking this to a tournament, like it won't make a difference. It definitely makes a difference whether you're on the Arceus build or like the Drotagon or the neither build. Like I said, I kind of wanted to cover all the bases. Arceus played very well into the grass matchups. The helmet punished more aggressive decks, like fighting decks like Gallade or even Rampardos. If they started trying to deal damage with their Sudowoodos, we were quickly chipping them for 40 between Darkrai charging and the helmet. The double red and Dawn helped a lot versus like Charizard and Gyarados, which is usually matchups that take advantage of how slow we are. The Dawn made it so we attacked sooner than they were prepared for. So a lot of Gyarados decks, if their Misties didn't hit, we were getting a little too aggressive for them to like even set up. And then red was making sure we were hitting all the ranges possible. Granted, there was games where since they were playing more heal cards, and like in the case of the mirror, their capes and their Pokemon Center ladies are stuff that I couldn't keep up with. And that was like the price I had to pay for like trying to have such a wide net over the entire meta. Ultimately, my run to Master Ball consisted of all the decks you saw here, besides those 3 like honorable mentions, as those were only decks that I found like very popular and successful like outside of like my own experience. So I wanted to put them there, just maybe if you have access to like those cards or you just want to try it out. They are successful decks. I just don't have the best luck using them. Maybe you have better luck. Regardless, I hope you find a list in this video that helps you climb, regardless of your goal, whether you're trying to get to Master Ball rank or you're just trying to get to Ultra, or you really want a Great Ball logo, or whatever your goal is, even if it's just to have fun. I hope a list here helps you achieve that goal. And if you've reached this part of the video, I just want to thank you for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing, as I post all things Pokemon Pocket, from openings to meta reports to expert solo battle guides and just deck profiles in general. And if you do, I'll truly appreciate it. And above all else, stay pro.